Everyone obsesses over Top Gun and Back to the Future when talking 80s blockbusters, but some of the decade's biggest moneymakers have completely vanished from pop culture memory. We're talking films that absolutely dominated theaters, broke box office records, and launched massive franchises that nobody under 30 even knows existed. Crocodile Dundee turned a charming Australian bushman into one of cinema's most unexpected success stories. But nobody talks about the absolute chaos that nearly killed this movie before it even reached American theaters. Mick Dundee survives a crocodile attack, impresses journalist Sue Charlton with his wilderness skills, and gets invited to Manhattan, where his rugged authenticity clashes hilariously with urban life, until Sue declares her love in a packed subway station. This $8.8 million Australian comedy raked in $328 million worldwide and became the second highest grossing film of 1986, behind only Top Gun. Paramount executives were having complete meltdowns because they had zero faith in an unknown Australian actor playing what seemed like a one-note character. Studio interference was relentless, with American suits demanding script rewrites to make Dundee more relatable, completely missing that his foreign mystique was the entire selling point. Paul Hogan fought like hell to preserve his authentic Australian dialogue, while executives pushed generic Hollywood quips. Test audiences went absolutely wild for the rough cut, leaving studio heads scrambling to overhaul their marketing from limited art house release to nationwide blockbuster campaign. The real behind-the-scenes romance between Hogan and Linda Kozlowski was creating its own drama, with their on-set chemistry turning into a full-blown affair that led to marriage. Here's the kicker nobody talks about. There were actually two completely different versions released worldwide. The international cut had most of Hogan's Australian slang replaced because test audiences were confused, making it noticeably shorter and less authentic than what Aussie audiences experienced. Romancing the Stone turned romance novelist Joan Wilder and bird smuggler Jack Colton into unlikely adventure heroes, while the entire production was secretly falling apart in ways that would make modern Hollywood publicists break into cold sweats. Joan travels to Colombia to rescue her kidnapped sister, crashes in the jungle, meets rugged Jack, and together they dodge mercenaries while hunting for a priceless emerald through waterfalls and crocodile-infested rivers. This jungle adventure romance pulled in massive box office numbers and launched Kathleen Turner's career into the stratosphere, but the reality was an absolute disaster that somehow resulted in movie magic. Director Robert Zemeckis was juggling complete chaos with Turner and Michael Douglas reportedly having serious romantic tensions off camera that were complicating every scene they shared. The on-set drama got so intense that Zemeckis was actually fired from his next project, Cocoon, partly because of how chaotic the production became. Several crucial scenes were mysteriously cut from the theatrical release, creating noticeable continuity gaps that eagle-eyed fans have been discussing for decades. Entire sequences involving villain Zolo interrogating villagers just vanished from the final cut, leaving viewers confused about character motivations. Some of this lost footage has surfaced in bootleg versions over the years, showing much darker content that was apparently deemed too intense for family audiences. The film sparked major cultural controversy upon release, with Colombian politicians absolutely furious about the stereotypical portrayal of their country as lawless and violent. Romancing the Stone caught particular heat for fueling harmful stereotypes while audiences were just trying to enjoy Turner and Douglas's electric chemistry. The year of Living Dangerously threw Mel Gibson and Linda Hunt into one of the most politically explosive film productions of the 80s, and what happened behind the scenes was absolutely insane. Australian journalist Guy Hamilton arrives in Jakarta during 1965's political chaos, partners with local photographer Billy Kwan, falls for British Embassy Secretary Jill Bryant, and risks everything to expose the truth as violence escalates around them. This political thriller earned Hunt an Oscar for playing a male photographer, making her the first woman to win for portraying the opposite sex, but the real drama happened when death threats forced the entire production to flee the Philippines after just 3 weeks of filming. Director Peter Weir and Gibson were receiving threats accusing the film of being anti-Islam, creating such serious safety concerns that the studio had to relocate everything to Australia, absolutely destroying their budget. The film tackled the 1965 Indonesian communist coup attempt and the horrific anti-communist purge that followed, where estimates suggest up to 1 million people were killed. Indonesia banned the film until 2004, keeping it completely unseen in the very country it depicted for over 20 years. When it finally aired on Indonesian cable, scenes were still being cut to avoid further political controversy. Against all odds turned what should have been a straightforward noir thriller into a behind-the-scenes nightmare that nearly destroyed the careers of everyone involved, while somehow producing one of the decade's most memorable theme songs. Down-and-out former football player Terry Brogan gets hired to track down a nightclub owner's missing girlfriend Jessie, only to discover she's a femme fatale with dangerous connections, and as Terry becomes entangled in jealousies, corruption, and murder, he must navigate shifting loyalties before a tense showdown forces him to confront his past. The real chaos was happening between Jeff Bridges and Rachel Ward, off camera though. Ward was absolutely furious about how the script kept shifting focus toward Bridges' character, leaving her with what she felt was an underdeveloped role. Director Taylor Hackford was constantly navigating these tensions while trying to maintain the film's noir atmosphere. But the on-set drama was affecting every scene they filmed together. Multiple versions of this film exist with different running times, and fans have discovered that crucial scenes involving Ward's character backstory were completely cut from the theatrical release. These deleted scenes reportedly gave much deeper insight into her motivations, but they were removed to streamline pacing. Some of this missing footage occasionally surfaces in bootleg copies, sparking ongoing interest in a director's cut that has never been officially released. Phil Collins ended up creating the hit theme song that became way more famous than the actual movie, which is pretty telling about how the film was received. Out of Africa swept audiences into colonial Kenya with one of the most gorgeous romantic epics ever filmed, but this prestige picture sparked controversies that are still raging decades later. Danish Baroness Karen Blixen moves to Kenya to manage a coffee plantation, but the marriage strains as she falls into a passionate yet complicated love affair with big game hunter Denise Finch Hatton, exploring the beauty and dangers of colonial Africa until Denise's tragic death leaves Karen reflecting on love, loss, and her enduring bond with the land. The film dominated the 1985 Oscars with 7 wins including Best Picture, but behind that lush cinematography was a production dealing with serious cultural criticism even before it hit theaters. This movie became a flashpoint for debates about Hollywood's romanticized portrayal of colonial Africa, with critics arguing the film focused entirely on white settlers' tribulations while completely marginalizing indigenous perspectives. By the 1990s, television programmers were cutting portions of the film's establishing scenes and quieter, intimate moments, creating hacked-up TV versions that disappointed fans. The real cultural chaos emerged in the 21st century, when university and festival screenings started being met with calls for content warnings and supplementary programming about colonial realities. Despite all this academic criticism, the film developed a completely separate cult following among romantics who discovered it through midnight cable airings and battered VHS copies. Decades later, collectors were still hunting down uncut versions, creating this weird split personality where the same movie was simultaneously being celebrated as a masterpiece and criticized as colonial propaganda. The Jewel of the Nile was supposed to capitalize on Romancing the Stone's success, but this sequel turned into a creative nightmare that exposed every crack in the original team's collaboration. Following their first adventure, Joan Wilder and Jack Colton find themselves caught up in a new escapade when Joan is kidnapped by mercenary Omar, who wants her to find the legendary Jewel of the Nile, forcing Jack to race to rescue her while navigating scorching heat, treacherous villains, and shifting alliances through North African deserts. Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner returned for what should have been easy money, but Turner was absolutely furious about the script centering entirely on the romantic leads while sidelining her character development. She pushed hard for script changes to give Joan Wilder more depth, while Douglas as producer was obsessed with maintaining commercial pacing over character nuance. Danny DeVito felt completely marginalized and was vocal about being reduced to comic relief, leading to sharp exchanges on set that director Louis Teague had to constantly navigate. The cultural controversy was just as messy, with the film's portrayal of Arab culture being so sensitive that broadcasters started cutting scenes involving Omar's violent dictatorship. Middle Eastern markets heavily censored or completely removed the darker political subtext, turning what was meant to be a tense political thriller into a sanitized action-adventure romp. These various edited versions created massive confusion for audiences and completely inconsistent narratives across different markets. Despite all this production drama and censorship chaos, the film developed its own cult following through VHS and late-night cable, where unedited bootleg copies became prized possessions. Police Academy turned a ragtag group of Police Academy misfits into box office gold, but the behind-the-scenes reality was way messier. When a new law forces the police force to accept all willing recruits regardless of standards, rebellious troublemaker Carrie Mahoney gets pushed into the academy as punishment, joining other disasters like the clumsy Fackler, the intimidating but gentle Hightower, and voice effects wizard Jones as they bumble through training while clashing with strict Commandant Lassard and antagonistic Harris, who thinks these recruits are destroying the force. This 1984 comedy launched a massive franchise that spawned 6 sequels, but what nobody talks about is how chaotic the actual production became. Steve Guttenberg was slightly nervous about leading such a comedic ensemble, and the cast constantly improvised dialogue and physical comedy that created this lively but sometimes completely uncontrollable shooting environment where scenes would stretch well beyond schedule. Michael Winslow's sound effect talents became so central that directors kept rewriting scenes around his abilities. The real nightmare started when the MPAA flagged the film's raunchy 80s humor and irreverent treatment of authority figures, forcing cuts to secure a PG-13 rating and keep it accessible to younger audiences. Conservative censorship boards demanded edits or limited screenings, worried the film would undermine respect for law enforcement. Ruthless People paired Danny DeVito and Bette Midler in what should have been comedy heaven, but their completely opposite acting styles created constant tension that nearly derailed the entire production. Greedy husband Ken plots to murder his wife Sandy to inherit her fortune, but when bumbling criminals kidnap Sandy intending to ransom her, the plan goes wildly astray as Sandy enjoys being kidnapped and refuses to be ransomed, throwing everyone into confusion. This dark comedy about a businessman plotting his wife's murder became a surprise hit, but Midler's meticulous, methodical approach clashed with DeVito's improvisational style, leading to creative disputes about tone and delivery that extended shoot times and created on-set arguments. Director Jim Abrahams was constantly encouraging comedic improvisation to capture their natural chemistry, but this led to some of the film's most iconic scenes being born from real frustration between the leads. The cultural backlash was immediate and intense, with parent groups and critics labeling the film morally ambiguous for its irreverent treatment of kidnapping and marital cruelty. The 80s cultural climate was not ready for a comedy that treated extortion and domestic violence as punchlines, but audiences were drawn to its sharp wit and complete reversal of typical victim narratives. Despite moderate box office success, Ruthless People found its true audience through the VHS rental boom and late-night cable broadcasts, where its fast-paced dialogue and outrageous character reversals made it perfect for repeat viewings. Midnight screenings and rental store recommendations helped it gain serious cult status among fans of adult dark comedy, with viewers quoting entire scenes and celebrating its blend of farce with darker social satire that most mainstream comedies wouldn't dare attempt.